I prefer to have my other computer on my stand. And I will just give my colleagues 1 or 2 minutes to roll up. We do not need a quorum to do a budget meeting, so we will get started at 10:02.
Good morning. Thank you. I'll wait for our turn. Thank you so much.
You can do some stretching or other jaw loosening exercises in these spare moments if you'd like.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Council President, to that end, who will go first? Can you remind me?
Well, I was under the impression that it was the fire department, but I was actually just looking to make sure that I'm not doing false advertising with that. Is that true, Holly?
You're correct, Councilor.
Yeah, fire and then public works.
Yes.
So you have more time for stretching.
I'll get busy.
This morning, my oldest kid turned 21, which is just a weird, I just remember the first time I was inaugurated, he was like this big. They grow like garden weeds. All right. To people, attendees, and presenters, I often before the council meeting will demote our guests at our meeting to attendee status. If you are the presenter or you're running the PowerPoint, you will need to be on the presenter status. So if I inappropriately demote somebody, just let them know. Let me know. Chief, who is doing your PowerPoint?
Council President Brendel and I will be.
Okay.
Holly was going to run that.
Okay, I did not demote Holly. And Sean?
Same sign.
Okay, great. It just helps me keep an eye on my colleagues' hands up in the order that they popped up. So I just like to have kind of just the council members and presenters in the top category, or I say above the fold. So it is 10:03, whoops, and we are going to call the meeting of the St. Paul City Council Budget Committee to order. Good morning, a beautiful morning here in St. Paul, and we are in the early phases of our budget process. As folks who have been paying attention have heard many times now, the mayor's office has presented its preliminary budget for our review. We are charged with setting a levy limit by the 15th of September, which we will be doing next week by hook or by crook. The obligation we have is to set kind of a guidepost, the limit for which we will be working under to set a final budget by December of this year. So our goal was to talk to the large general fund departments in advance of setting that levy limit. So we had a 30,000-foot overview and deeper dive into at the budget at the same time before we set that levy limit. And then we have a few months to really dig in and see what can and should be shifted around. And in the meantime, we have the overlay of the American Rescue Plan dollars, the earmarks that have been reinstated in Washington, and other variables at play that could change things a lot from September to December in our budget process in a manner that really hasn't happened in a very long time. So all eyes are kind of on the feds, on our ARP planning as well as this budget. So there's a lot going on, and lots of moving pieces. And I think that what we're looking at today may look very different in December, but this work in front of us today is really about setting that levy limit. Today we are hearing from the St. Paul Fire Department, St. Paul Public Works. We have about we have 2 hours allocated to these departments. I'm going to try to keep both to about 45 minutes. If we run over, we run over, but ideally we'll keep each conversation to about 45 minutes. And then again, we have the opportunity to invite them back to the council if there are areas where we want to do a deeper dive as we go into the final budget process. So good morning. I see my colleagues have filled in ranks and we've got a good group here. And so with that, I am going to introduce our chief of the fire department, Chief Inks, to bring us through the 2020 budget proposal. Welcome and thank you for being here today.
Council President Brenwin, other members of the council, I thank you. I appreciate the time and the opportunity to present our proposed budget for 2022. If I've moved my head around, I'm trying to find my camera here, so I apologize for that. So Holly, thank you so much for running the PowerPoint. And with that, I will begin the proposal. And what I'm going to talk about today is briefly we'll touch on how our budget is fits into the overall citywide budget, as well as how our internal budget is broken up. And I'll also move into what the 2022 proposal will look like. So I assume questions as they come up, we'll answer them, and I'll move through as quickly as possible and answer all the questions to the best of my ability. So thank you again for your time.
That sounds great. And we'll just, when hands come up, what I've been doing is kind of waiting until the end of that slide. And if you are just about to come up to a point that's brought up in a question, you can certainly defer the answer to the slide that's ahead of us. But thank you.
Great, thank you. So to begin with, as you'll see, the fire department budget is comprised of 21% of the overall citywide budget. Next slide. Thank you. That's the general fund portion. The special fund portion, fire, is made up of 2% of the overall citywide budget. Within the overall citywide budget, special and general fund, fire falls in with 11% of the overall citywide budget. Within our own budget, our general fund is made up of salaries, fringes, some worker comp costs, services, materials, and supplies. And as you can see, roughly 86% of our budget is made up of people, right? Personnel, salaries, and fringes associated with that. Within our special fund, it's spread out a little further. We have materials and supplies, our capital outlay. There are some salaries with our PSG staff and fringes with that as well. Services and some worker comp costs associated with that special fund.
Chief, you may be coming to this, but in all of these so far, I haven't seen any mention of like the trucks, the fleet. What does that fall under?
Council President Brenwin, that would fall under our special fund, our vehicles, fleet, our staff out at the public safety garage, materials and labor associated with repairing or working on our apparatus and our other vehicles. So that falls under the special fund.
Okay.
And then with fire's budget, all of our funds, as you'll see, the different expenses that are associated with it. But again, the majority of our costs are associated with people, salaries and fringes and worker comp costs. with that completes the overall overview of how our budget looks internally, as well as how we fall into the citywide budget with all departments. With that, I'll move into giving you a Station 7 update, which is good news. We obviously, I think everyone on the meeting knows that Station 7 has been a priority for the fire department, as well as the mayor's office, and quite frankly, many of the council members, if not all of the council members, has been a big priority for all of us. So a huge thank you to everybody. I really do appreciate the commitment in that project. Station 7 is built in the 1930s, third oldest fire station in St. Paul, and many of you have walked through that station. It not only limits, there's limitations for our staff that actually work out of that building, and then there's huge limitations for our residents in that area, as we're not capable, we don't have the ability to put the appropriate resources in that building to serve the residents. So this project moving forward will allow us to do that. 2019 CIB funding had $500,000, as well as 2020. And then 2022, 2023, the proposed funding is $8 million to complete that project, with a total projected cost of $9 million. So we are reviewing purchase agreement right now with the Port Authority, securing some land. So we're moving forward in this project. So thank you so much.
And Chief, just we're excited about this too, and just as kind of a footnote to this piece of the conversation, we will be looking further at the kind of the new approach to CIB funding. I think that there's been kind of ongoing concerns with earmarking $5 million that sits in a bank account for 3 or 4 years while we accrue more CIB dollars, and with the lower interest rates and the opportunity to do an opportunity to look at things a little differently. We have pushed to the top of the list 3 priority projects, including Station 7, a library, and a rec center. And so we will be looking further at that, how that kind of complex, but potentially very beneficial, a different approach to funding will look like when we look at our CIB funding separately. So a little footnote there.
Yeah, Council President Brenman, thank you for mentioning that, as well as the other 2 projects. All 3 projects are, very important to the entire city. What I've mentioned, our fire station and how it helps us for our staffing, and also the residents in that area. But a new library, new rec center, all serves the residents of the city. So I appreciate all 3 projects moving forward. So thank you. Briefly, our financial summary for our general fund, 2020, we had a little over 66 million. The 2021 adopted budget was a little over 68 million. And then with the proposed increase of 3.8%, we would land a little over $70.5 million for our 2022 proposed budget. Some of the general fund budget changes that we're proposing to make is we took an approach for this process. Instead of solely looking at reductions, we thought, how can we help close the citywide budget gap by generating different revenue? And so with that, we were able to look internally on kind of what we had been charging for things and how they fit into industry standards, and when was the last time we've changed things. And so with that approach, we were able to come up with revenue generating ideas. So that the first line, revenue increases for service, that's how we landed with that statement, and just looking internally on how we've been doing things. Other things that make up the 3.8% increase is we want to restore 2 of our FTEs that were lost in 2021. One is the health and wellness coordinator, as well as the one EMS coordinator. And I'll get into specifically each as we move along. We transitioned 9 of our Station 51 fire medic cadet staff into our BLS 911 response. That move allowed us to increase the capacity to respond in a BLS nature, as well as building our pathways program into the position of firefighter. We dropping down one bullet, nine firefighter FTE growth through the 2020 safer staffing pilot grant. We're well into that safer grant, and we're able to hire an increased number of staffing that in 2020 landed us at an all-time high for our staffing levels, with a decreased cost in overtime. So allowing us to execute that pilot program, it worked. So your questions. Council President or Council Member Prince, you have a question?
Thank you, Chief. I'm just wondering if you could tell me with the SAFER grant, I'm assuming that that is a grant that then we eventually will be needing to fund through the general fund. Is that correct? Those positions will have an expectation that we'll be able to fund them in future years?
Council President Brenmo, Council Member Prince. Normally, yes. At the time of accepting the grant, you have to provide the FEMA with your staffing numbers at the time, and you're required to maintain the whatever positions you're given at the time. We were given 9 firefighter positions. You're required to maintain 9 FTEs above your current staffing. When we accepted that grant, we were at a personnel level of, I believe, 409. So we are now required to maintain a level of 418, and our authorized budgeted strength is 434. So there is not a future budget implication in this SAFER grant.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. The other Council Member Prince was, thank you. Moving on to other changes that proposed for 2022 is a new program, Social Worker Response Program. I'll get into that program here in a little bit. It's a program designed at a super high level. It's a program designed to provide social worker response 24/7. And as I move into that slide, I'll explain further what that program may look like. Other proposals are the COVID-related HVAC upgrades, and we did have a building maintenance FTE reduction, a small, we had an employee retire, and there was a small savings there as well. So. And this slide just, it just shows how our special fund is broken down. And Council President Brenmo, you mentioned vehicles. This is where you see equipment services, fire, police, in Fund 722. So moving on, our summary of the 2022 budget changes. Again, we are looking at paramedic revenue growth. Our run volumes are at an all-time high. We historically see, a 10-year average of about 4% annually increase in runs. We are experiencing a 12.82 increase in run volume at this point of the year. So we expect that to continue. And obviously, the more runs we go on, the more transports we make. There's an increase in revenue there.
And Chief, you do say this in the bullet point, but just to clarify, these are that increases in the paramedic runs, not fire.
Council President Brenman, absolutely. Our BLS runs, our ALS runs, and as well as our loaded transport miles, which is the next bullet. So obviously, the more medical calls we go on, the more medical transports we go on, the more revenue that's generated. And with the increased run volume that we're seeing, in my 27 years, I've never seen it this high. And then the projections of where it's going to land, we're going to We're going to come close to 60,000 calls this year.
And is that because of COVID calls? Is it because people are at home and getting injured at home? What explains this giant increase?
Council President Brenmoen, my best answer for you is yes. We're seeing an increase in all sorts of areas. Our homeless population, obviously dealing with a pandemic, the different variants that are out there now. People are at home. It's just a wide variety of increases in overall run volumes.
Okay, so nothing in particular. Not like everyone's at home doing their COVID project and falling off the ladder or what have you. So it sounds like it's just a kind of a steady increase in all areas, and then in addition, COVID related and COVID itself.
Council President Brennan, absolutely. The other, I'll drop down to the third line, the paramedic quality control fee recapture. We propose that injecting a person to review all of our paramedic run reports and put a quality control eye on that run report, that we can capture additional revenue as well. I'll touch on it here in a little bit, but the industry standard is, in a lot of other agencies have teams of quality control personnel to review run reports and ensure that the most accurate run report is submitted for billing. And we feel that having a FTE to perform those duties, we can capture an additional $762,000. Additional revenue through increasing our BLS capabilities and staffing. When I talked about shifting some of our Station 51 and Fire Medic Cadet personnel into the BLS program, that will allow us to increase the staffing hours, increase the availability for that resource, which we predict will increase the BLS revenue of $600,000. And additionally to the paramedic quality control, we'll also have the BLS quality control. That person will do both of those, basically reviewing our run reports to submit the most accurate run report. Okay. And the last item is our fire suppression contracts. As many of you know, that the council voted to accept the Falcon Heights contract as well as the Whipple building contract. So thank you for that. And that brings in an additional little over $200,000 for those services.
Chief, quick question for you, and I'm sure it's embedded into one of the slices of pie that we went over in the initial few slides. But do you, I know that we provide fire service for the state fair. Is that just like cost revenue neutral, or is that accounted for someplace? Just looking, I saw Falcon Heights, and I once again was thinking we should just take over all of Falcon Heights, including the fair. But I know that we provide a valuable service for the fair, and just curious is that reflected in our budget?
So, Council President Brenmoen, actually, it's a separate contract with the State Fair, and I believe it's around $167,000 we contract, or they pay us to provide the paramedic services there. Those dollars do come back to the citywide general fund, so we won't see it reflected in our internal budget, but we do provide the staffing for that service, separate than Falcon Heights and the other contracts.
Okay. Thank you.
Moving into the paramedic revenue piece of the proposal, as I mentioned, we are proposing to increase the mileage rate. Right now, we charge about, I think, $16 a loaded mile for transporting patients. We're proposing to boost that up to $19 a loaded mile, and still be below the industry standard. It's a value that hasn't been changed in 12 to 15 years. and hasn't been looked at. So again, with our approach to this budget process, we felt we could. We obviously provide an incredible service to the residents of St. Paul. I'm a bit biased, but I think we can all agree that our service to the city of St. Paul's residents and visitors is by far above and beyond, I think, what other agencies may provide. So with that, I believe it's fair to properly bill in line with what we're doing, still being below what the industry standard is. Touched on that. Let's see.
Chief, and I appreciate that. And I do think, I mean, obviously we always want to, recognize that there's an end user on these billing. In this case, most often, I believe it will be an insurance company, but I think that the city can tend to be slow to increase its rates, to match the industry standard. I know we could look at vacant building fees and other charges we have on a somewhat regular basis, but it does feel like regular is like every 5 years instead of a course adjustment every year. And this increase that you're proposing is fairly modest in terms of getting us closer to the industry standard. So I do appreciate that incremental approach, but I also don't think that we should apologize for adjusting and matching our costs with our charges with the costs of providing service, and what does that look like in compared to the rest of the industry. So I do appreciate this adjustment, and I think we should just kind of keep a regular eye on it and not wait to try to fill a revenue hole, as opposed to make sure that we're keeping up with what those costs are and what that charge should be.
Council President Brenmo, and I appreciate you saying that. It's with the budget challenges we've all faced in the last 3 years, it's challenging, right? But it does force us into looking at opportunities, and looking internally. We were able to find something that we should be keeping an eye on, not just when we're kind of pushed that way. It's part of providing the service, and definitely pushed, or not, just guided us down a path to look at. We know we provide an incredible service, and how do we compare to what others are charging? And we get we're focused on human care, right? Providing care for our residents, and what it costs is sometimes secondary, but it does cost some money to provide this care, and looking at what we're charging was definitely an approach we need to keep an eye on in the future. And we're talking about ALS transports rates increasing $100, our BLS transport rates increasing $75, and like I mentioned, our transport mileage rates going up $3. And so it's not a huge increase. These are billed to the insurance company, and we're still below the national average, but it's something we definitely need to monitor as we move forward. Are we charging appropriately and fairly? And so keeping all that in mind. So thank you for mentioning that.
Right. And like other cities, charges for city services, if we need to take an individual case on a case by case basis, we can look at that separately, as opposed to universally undercharging for the service. So I think that kind of separating hey, this was a unique situation, we're going to take this separately, to like the overall cost and expense. Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Thank you, Council President Brenmo. Chief Inks, I really appreciate this discussion as well, and I think those increases seem really reasonable in terms of their being charged back to insurance companies. I should probably know this, but in the case of you're responding to calls for people who are not insured, how do we cover those needs? Because I imagine that's a fair number of people that require ambulance services.
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Prince, Absolutely. We encounter that often, and how those are paid out is through Medicare and Medicaid programs. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Moving on, I think I covered the next slide as well. The paramedic and BLS revenue summed it up as what the increases look like. The last time we've addressed this increase and what it's going to look like moving forward, as well as the quality control piece. Having that person really look at our run reports. We feel we're leaving money on the table by not having that physician review all of our run reports for accuracy. There's the money component as well as I mentioned many times, is submitting the most accurate document run report as possible. So. Our fire suppression contracts, as I mentioned, we have the Falcon Heights contract, we have Lauderdale contract and Whipple building contract. And there's a small piece near the Whipple building VA that we have, I believe, a DOT contract, small contract with them as well. So we're really trying to market our services, that we can provide services outside of just the city of St. Paul. So, that's the summary of that. Equates to a little over $200,000. Again, our summary of our changes that we're proposing. We propose to bring back our one FTE that we lost during COVID budget decreases, and that's the health and wellness coordinator position. We would like to bring on 2 EMS coordinator positions, one of which we lost through a budget reduction, and the other person would perform those quality control measures that I talked about, as well as some EMS coordinator calls. As I mentioned, we're gonna knock on the door of 60,000 calls annually, and roughly, high 80s, 90% of those calls are medical. And so having the appropriate leadership and staff and supervision for those services is important, as well as I mentioned, the quality control piece. We'd like to, we've already shifted the EMT or the fire medic cadet positions into the EMT roles, and the salary difference for that shift is a little under $42,000. The other program that is in our proposal, we propose to implement, is the social worker contract program, and that's the program that revolves around the 24/7 resource available in the form of a new resource available for our residents in the form of social workers. And I'll touch on that in an upcoming slide. And then the last proposal is the HVAC upgrades through COVID, what we've had to do to make our stations cleaner.
And Chief, is that the maintenance on the HVAC, or is that because if it's just HVAC upgrades, I'm curious why it wouldn't be an ARP or CARES fund line item.
Council President Brenmo, that is for the filters that we put into our stations, and I believe we did submit for ARP funding for that as well. But it will be an ongoing cost to place filters in the HVAC.
Okay, that's really what my question was. Is it the actual HVAC system, or is it the ongoing? It sounds like with the filters and the maintenance, every department so far that we've talked to, including City Council, says that the fancy upgrades cost fancy dollars in maintenance. So there's that end of it too. Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Yeah, I that is a question for me. Even if it is going to ultimately become an annual cost, I would think at least for the next few years when we have ARP money, if those are filters that we required because of COVID, I would feel better about getting the ARP money while we can. The other thing I'm curious about, and maybe you were going to address this, but and this may be a question for Mr. McCarthy, but I'm wondering how the fire recruitment exam fits into COVID recovery. And if Mr. McCarthy wants to respond to that.
Sure, Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Prince. It's a one-time expense, as the chief slide notes here. It's a little bit different from one time because it does happen every several years. We usually try to find a one-time source rather than having to add it to the levy for a 1-year basis and then get rid of it the next year and then come back again a few years later. We do have flexibility with some ARP funding related to hiring, and so there's potential to put this under the jobs category where we're adding back jobs specifically in the fire department, and there's also some flexibility around the lost revenue provisions within the ARP. But I think I would make the case that this is it's a jobs program in the sense that we're going to be using it to recruit and hire several new firefighters. And the chief can I'm sure, speak to the details of that much more than I could.
Thank you. That's adequate.
Thank you. And that the last portion, obviously, we just touched on the further. We do plan on having an academy or an entrance exam in 2022. Adding the health and wellness coordinator back, as everyone knows, during the reductions to help with the citywide gap that we were all faced with last year, we reduced a vacant position we had in the health and wellness coordinator position. We were able to secure some funding. Thank you so much for that, and contract services with Minfire. That has worked well for us, but we believe a sustainable long-term plan is to have a dedicated person addressing the health and wellness needs of our staff. We're seeing more PTSD cases, more injuries, and as I mentioned, our run volume is taxing our employees and our staff. So having a dedicated person to address things and be proactive in programs, working with Minfire this last year or the next year moving forward, we believe we can work hand in hand with that one more year of contract and then have our dedicated staff member addressing the needs that we have with our firefighters. As I mentioned, our proposal is to add 2 EMS coordinator positions, one of which was that was reduced in our budget reduction of last year, and the other person to bring on and to fill that capacity of the quality control measures. So we would have then a total of 4 EMS coordinators, 3 of which would work 24/7. Again, with our increased run volume, responding to a pandemic, all the different variants out there, we feel it's imperative that we have a 24/7 capability for that supervision, as well as injecting that other person in the quality control measures that I talked about. Restructuring a BLS unit, I've mentioned that a few times so far. We've already expanded the staffing in that program. We'd like to expand the hours, expand the capabilities. The program has been extremely successful, and we are approaching, I believe in October, we will have our first true pathway employees coming on the fire department. So the program is working. It not only helps send the right resource to the resident, it also keeps the other resources in service, our ALS and our fire resources. But then the bonus on top of all of that is the Pathways program, where these employees have promotional rights into the position of firefighter. And that comes full circle in October. So this program has been extremely successful, and I do appreciate everyone's help with that. The social worker response program, again, this program is new. I'd like to speak about it at a really high level and ask that I'm allowed to come back in about 30 to 45 days, if that's possible, to actually have a structured plan for you. It's a new thought of where we're moving in serving our residents. What it looks like at a high level is, again, a 24/7 capability of providing a social worker for our residents that we're responding to, our homeless population, our mental health population. Um, what's going on right now is there's a gap in coverage. During business hours, there's capabilities. After business hours, that capability is diminished, and a lot of times police, fire, libraries, parks, everyone has to still serve our residents, but we may not be giving them the resource they need at the time. To give an example, our staff has been very active in helping with the unsheltered encampments, our homeless population. One of our deputy chiefs has gone out last Christmas Eve, tent to tent, and during a snowstorm to try to help these residents get some shelter, which that particular person would do over and over again. But to have a sustainable plan, that can't be the plan. And so this additional resource will fill that gap. And working with our partners with Catholic Charities, Safe Space, Union Gospel Mission, Listening House, working with those partners to develop what the program should look like to have a 24/7 social worker response team is the ultimate goal. So.
And Chief, so are you asking basically that we keep this in as a placeholder, that there's a $600,000 social worker response program that you do not have all the details worked out for, but your intention is to have them worked out and presented to the council before we pass a final budget?
Council President Brenmoen, that's absolutely right. I have ideas, and for me to express those now would be simply in the idea phase. And I'd really like the opportunity to vet this program properly because it is so important to our residents. Right now, as I mentioned, our paramedics are responding, our deputy chiefs are responding, everyone's responding to try to help. And oftentimes we get them to a medical facility or we try to find shelter, but that's quite frankly not the help they may need at the time. It just kicks the can down the road. We had a call with a lady in the middle of the street, and police and fire were on scene for an extended period of time, and did our best to help, to give the resources. We definitely acted within our capability. The lady did get on the bus, but all that did was now transfer the problem over to the bus MTC. So we want to provide a program that would be housed in the fire department, but be a citywide resource for everybody to use to get the right resource for the person that needs it. So.
Okay, and I'm asking really for clarity on the program and when we can expect to see the details, because the council has often expressed hesitancy about budgeting for a program that isn't, that will be invented in 2022 or beyond. And I think this one in particular has been a little bit of a hot potato. So the commitment to return with a fully baked program for us to look at before we pass a final budget is important to me. So I appreciate that clarification. And I see Ms. Prince also has a hand up.
Thank you, Council President Brenmoen, and Chief, thanks. I am concerned here. I am extremely proud of the work of our city, of DSI, of the fire department, the police department, our police coast unit, in dealing with these problems. I am incredibly proud of that. I think we have stepped in a way that that really is, we filled a void that that has not been met. But I need to strongly say at this time that our county is responsible for human services, mental health services, public health. They actually are responsible for coming up with shelters. This is traditionally and never part of our responsibility to be temporary housing provider. The county in the county attorney's office is also responsible for the whole issue of civil commitments, which factors into this. And so I really need to be sure that when we as the city are talking about social workers to do what has traditionally been the role of the county, that I'm really concerned about what you might call mission creep here. And Chief, don't get me wrong. I recognize that that you are coming forward with this and the administration is coming forward with this in all the ways that are the right ones, because there has been a void with the increase in homelessness and the problems related to untreated mental health and chemical dependency. But I honestly feel that when you come back before us, the county needs to be a partner in this, and the county needs to be putting some money forward for this. It is, when you list our partners there, one of them absolutely, and an overriding partner on providing social workers and help to this population, needs to be Ramsey County. So I want to be really clear about this. I do not want to see us developing a program that is taking the county off the hook for things that are part of their charter, their basic responsibilities as a county, managing federal and state grants for human services, mental health services, shelter services, civil commitments, and the like. So don't take this as any criticism of you or your bringing this forward. But again, if the county isn't part of it, I am going to have a really hard time having the city take this on its own, because the county needs to be responsible for 24/7. That cannot be something that they're not available in the middle of the night because somebody needs to get into housing or into the hospital or whatever it is. So I'll calm down here, but definitely let's get some discussions going with Ramsey County before you come back.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Prince, I appreciate your passion, and definitely that's part of the planning phase of talking with them and their capabilities, and just and I don't take it as a criticism towards us at all. I appreciate that. The reality for us is that we go out 24/7, and these problems are not structured in a manner where they happen from 9 to 5.
Yep.
It's always after hours. It's always on a weekend, and all the staff throughout the city, libraries, DSI, the police department, the parks department, and I'm obviously biased towards our staff. We'll go out anytime. As I mentioned, Chief Sampson is in the room with me, and he's the one that went out Christmas Eve in a snowstorm, tent to tent, and lining up rides, and it's because we care, and there's a gap, and so it's definitely part of the planning process. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you, and I know I speak for all of my colleagues when I say how proud we are of exactly what you just said, that the city has been there when the need has been greatest, and so thank you for that.
And I really appreciate your points, Ms. Prince. We bring these points up often. And so I do think that especially when we are going to be getting a report back on what the structure of this program looks like in a month and a half or so, we just got an update from the Ramsey County Continuum of Care team, and they seem like they're firing on all cylinders and ready to take on work. And so make sure, to Ms. Prince's point, they're not specifically called out on your list of partners, and they are the partner, so making sure that they are part of this proposal, and that we have a clear understanding of where those lines are drawn. And I fully agree that the 9 to 5 model doesn't work when it comes to social work and people in crisis. It's a 24/7 position. And so we need to figure out how to fill that gap. And I really appreciate Ms. Prince putting a fine point on the county piece of that, which is the really making sure that we're doing the work that's in our swim lane and not filling holes that other agencies aren't doing on their own, just because we know we have someone has to do it. But I think we're in a good place right now to be able to call out to our partners. They feels like they're ready to receive those requests and do something with them. I see Ms. Yang has a hand up as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that the social workers response program was the part of the proposal budget that I was most excited about. So I'm really eager to hear more information about it, Chief Ings. And I do think it would be really important to hear more about how this work weaves into the county's work too, just so that we continue doing our work overall in social responses in a very interconnected way. And something I would like to know too is how, well, as you finalize your details, like how you came to your decision around proposing, I think you said 10 social workers, right? And so just the explanation around that would be super helpful. I do feel this is a really important program to have, like being someone who comes from a social work background myself, I really, see the need for the social issues that we see getting a social response, and for us to have a gap in those services, it just really continues to show like why so many of these social issues go unresolved and are perpetuated as well. And so I'm really excited for this and very supportive too, but also eager to hear more information about it. So thanks for presenting about it.
Council President Brenman and Councilmember Yang, thank you. Again, this is really early in the planning phase, and definitely, I apologize, the county was not listed as a slide, but they're partners today. They're the during the day response, and definitely will be part of the talks and planning for the gap that's been identified. So, and as far as 10 social workers, I definitely just want to be very open and transparent here. We have definitely not landed on what a number looks like. It's just way too early of what the final product will look like. But I do appreciate the opportunity to come back and deliver a plan to you.
Great. Thank you.
HVAC upgrades, I think I've driven this point home pretty well. It's again for filters for the ongoing system in our fire station. So, and the last item is our recruitment exam. We do plan on doing an exam next year. We are currently hiring 15 firefighters. They just received the final phone calls last week for their final job offers, and they will start the academy in October. So with that probably will end that list, and we'll start a new exam process next year. And that does conclude my proposal presentation. And is there any further questions around anything I've presented?
It looks like Ms. Prince has a hand up. Oh, you may be on mute.
Thank you. I was doing so much better with that. I think this question is for Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McCarthy, I'm wondering, of the 3.8% increase, I am wondering, does the fire department have the same attrition financing that police does?
Council President Bremo and Councilmember Prince, the fire department also has a number built in for their attrition savings, as do most other general fund departments in the city. We're working on pulling together that information as a response to a council request that we got last week, but I don't have that with me this morning.
But we are looking at the fire department budget, so you don't know what the attrition.
I don't have that right in front of me, but we'll make sure to get that to you as soon as we can. But
yeah,
I do know that they have attrition savings built into their budget.
I realize how busy you are, Mr. McCarthy, but that absolutely should be known when we're talking about the fire budget, because police and fire are so similar in terms of staffing and requirements for there to be able to be deployed at the numbers that we need them. So that leads me to the question for, I guess, the chief, which is, are you able to fill vacancies, chief, when they occur among the firefighting staff?
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Prince, yes, we are. We do fill when we feel we do wait until we have an appropriate number to hold an academy, and appropriate is, and we haven't historically put on a group of 5 or 4 or 6. We try to wait until it's a decent size, because there's so many resources going into the academy. So, but yeah, we've been able to hire when we need people.
And so it's not based on having to meet a couple $1 million of attrition in your department.
Council member Prince, we were able to pull that information. It's roughly 1.3 million in the fire department budget.
So that's my question, I guess. If the chief feels he can hire, despite the 1.3 million of funded attrition, how is that different from the police department?
Isn't it the police academy? There has to be a police academy before they hire, whereas the chief can just pull off the top of the eligible list. I thought that was the kind of the bottleneck, was the academy.
Well, it just sounds like Chief Inks is able to fill vacancies when they occur, and that is not the case in the police department.
The thing is, the academy, I'm looking to Mr. McCarthy, since I'm not sure the chief can answer about the police.
Right. Council President Bremo and Councilmember Prince, I think we'll have additional information on the police hiring and the way that their attrition budget works as follow-up for you as well. But just like the police department and the fire department both have a salary budget that they need to manage to, and once they're able to forecast that they'll be able to meet their salary budget and hire or hold an academy, they're able to do that.
And so, Chief, right now, you said you're at 409 and your full complement is 434. Is that right?
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Prince, right now we are at, I believe, 408, and we're hiring 15. That number that we talked about does not. Those are the staff that are on the operational side. So there's the overall personnel staffing is above that number, and I can get you that overall number quickly. But one thing I want to touch on in our hiring, which may be a bit different than the police, is that what I talked earlier about the pilot program that we were able to run, where we hired above our authorized strength and onboard more people. During our study and collecting the data around that, we learned that during an academy, the 3 to 4 month process, we would lose 10% through retirements as we were onboarding people. So by the time they finished their academy, we were still understaffed. So we proposed with OFS and the mayor's office that we were allowed to hire over our authorized strength, and that program proved to work. And so with that, again, we had an all-time high in our daily staffing average, as well as saving a considerable amount of money in overtime costs.
That's great information to have, and thank you for that, because I would like to have us look at that for the police department as well. Thank you so much for that explanation.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for the chief? Okay. All right. What is this number 4, Chief Inks? Fourth budget you've been through with us?
Council President Brenmo, I believe it is. This one, if you recall, I was talking to Holly before this started. I put on my coat as I normally do, and I was actually driving to a funeral last year for one of our firefighters, and I still had the black band on my badge, and going through that process was, just it's unfortunate we put these nice, you can't tell, but these are pretty nice coats, but we put them on during when it's not so good event, not such good events. So yes, so this is my fourth. I'm not in a vehicle. I'm not having my wife flip the slides for me and talk as I drive. So this is a little more comfortable, but I can't thank you enough for taking the time and listening to us and all of the support that every council member has had for our fire department as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And we look forward to hearing back from you with some answers to the questions on the program. And we are also looking forward to hearing more about the CIB funding that includes our handful of our pet projects. So thanks for teeing those things up for us. Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Just very quickly, I want to say, a personal experience I had this year. Um, I had a EMT call. I dialed 911 when I had a bee sting earlier this summer. I should have had an EpiPen, but I hadn't had a reaction in 20 years, so I didn't. And I have to say, the professionalism, no one knew I was a city council member. The professionalism and the whole experience was incredible. I was so proud of what we do, and being on the receiving end of a scary emergency was, brought it home in ways that it may not have before. So thanks so much to all of you, and we really appreciate the incredible commitment of our fire department and all of its people.
Thank you, Councilmember Prince, and all the council. If I can close with this, that our women and men of our department, this last couple of years in the pandemic, civil unrest, what occurred post George Floyd incident in the University Avenue, and the continued work that they do daily. I just try to take every opportunity to say thank you to them personally, but in a public forum like this, I can't be more thankful to be the chief of this fire department, and to be the leader of the women and men on this department, because they do incredible work every single day, 24/7. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We will leave on that high note. Thank you for your presentation today, and we would look forward to speaking to you again in the weeks ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
And we will switch gears over to patiently waiting Director Kershaw from Public Works with his 2020 budget presentation. Welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Council President. It's great to be here. And I have to say, not to make this about the fire department, as a fellow director, it's been really helpful to work with the chief and through this budget process, not just in the course of work. The way they took on the budget has been a model for us. So I'm grateful to them in lots of ways. What I will do, Holly, we have a PowerPoint that I will walk through. If Holly can pull it up, I'm grateful to Holly, and grateful to Holly to putting this together. Bruce Beasy is in on the call as available to answer questions. I'm grateful to him, and to Larry on his staff, to Tara and Laura in the Office of Financial Services as well. So I get to present it, but a lot of the work was done and supported by other folks. What we'll do today is walk through I'll remind you of the scope of the work in Public Works, both the actual work we do very quickly in the context of the budget. We'll look at some opportunities within the budget, as well as opportunities that are in future work. I do want to highlight that this presentation today is almost entirely about the operating budget, and there will be future conversations that relate to the capital budget, which I know is of primary concern to everybody. We'll go through some specific funds and then certainly take any questions along the way. So at a glance, thank you, Holly. So the scope of the work in terms of functions, we do street maintenance, traffic signs, markings, parking meter maintenance, sewer maintenance and engineering, engineering and design for all of our infrastructure, roads, streets, lighting, sewers, and capital project development and management. You may see the next slide, Holly. I think the numbers here are really impressive, and in terms of just the scope of the work within the city of St. Paul. Miles of sanitary and, over 800 miles of sanitary sewers and streets, 450 miles of storm sewers, over 1,000 miles of sidewalk, the number of signalized intersections, parking meter spaces, just 70,000 traffic signs, and the ability to make sure that they're all replaced as they needed, 68 city-owned bridges, and almost 32,000 street light poles. So an enormous scope to the work that we do. Looking at the budget, public works spending, this gets to the functions of the general fund spending. So within the context of the 26.5 million of general funds, about 2/3 of that goes to streets, a quarter to traffic, and a little bit to meters and engineering, a small amount to administration. Functionally, that describes the area where the general fund dollars go. Another way we could look at it is the next slide. In terms of what does that pay for within those functions. So no surprise, mostly salary and benefits, some services, materials. Transfers out are 2 other functions within the budget, which would include some of these same service breakdowns. Next slide. For context, we were able to make progress restoring reductions that took place in 2020 and 2021. That part of what we did last year in the context of COVID, and then again in 2021, is freeze positions and hold those vacant. So the only position that's not restored is 1 FTE and a parks worker position. So we're able to bring back city planner, electrical inspector, 2 electricians, and a painter. The painter was brought back this year, which was really important, and we're grateful for your support there. While not back to the 2019 amount, bike and ped funding is about 75% of what it was then. Council President, Councilmember Prince.
Yep, I'm just looking for, kind of waiting for you to get to the bottom of the slide. So if we can, if you want to interrupt yourself, go right ahead. But otherwise we'll hold till the bottom of the slide typically.
That sounds fine. And the last part of this slide is just there were some debt service reductions that we were able to take advantage of in the budget.
Ms. Prince.
Thank you both. Mr. Kershaw, and maybe you're going to get to this, but I'm just wondering, I know the painter position, the street painter position has been, I believe, filled with ARP funding. And I'm wondering about the other staff positions that have been restored. Is that ARP or general fund?
If I can call on Bruce Beasy for that to make sure that I get that correct. Bruce, is that fair? I know that in this year it was ARP funds. I believe in next year it's general funds, but Bruce, could you correct that?
Yeah, it's ARP funds for this year. And John or Tara, can you tell us about the tails out into next year?
Council President Bremo and Councilmember Prince, and I'm standing in for Ms. Baranak today, who is doing her civic duty with jury duty today. Yes, it's for 2021 only for the painter with ARP, and then transitions to the City General Fund for 2022.
But for the other positions, Mr. McCarthy?
For the other positions are all general fund as well.
Okay. So it's just ARP funds for the painter.
And just 2021 for the painter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
all of these positions are.
They're all general fund.
That's correct, Council Member. Thank you, Director McCarthy. In the work, I've talked about this before, there are opportunities to advance a number of the city's goals, looking at our work through a racial equity lens and a sustainability lens, partnering with Hero to expand our work with minority and women-owned businesses. We're looking at some innovations to how we do routing software for our snowplows, street design, street lighting, bike infrastructure, EV car infrastructure, and just through our regular course of work with sewer and solid waste program. These are great opportunities to innovate, to advance equity, and to advance our resilience and sustainability goals. These are all done obviously through cross-departmental partnerships with parks, with PED, with DSI, with a number of our partners within the city. Next slide. The one thing, this is just to acknowledge the larger conversation that we want to come back to, the need to address, need to invest an additional $25 to $30 million a year to keep on course to maintain our current PCI. This slide is really just a reflection of the conversations that have been had with you and that we look to address through the capital